So what if the long-awaited trade-up doesn't happen? Can we make a good situation out of that? Let's give it a shot on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we are always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who make Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate y'all so very much. If you are new here, hello and welcome. You can find this show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is an audio listening app, podcast listening app like the SiriusXM app, where you can also find live broadcasts of games for any sports team. Just search it out and you can find like home radio broadcasts right there on the app. Just like search out Timberwolves or whatever. And you can also find this show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, I am succumbing to weakness and doing a mock draft. So I'm abandoning my principles. No, I don't have that big an issue with mock drafts. And we haven't really done like a serious one here in like a month, so I figure it's time. And part of the reason that I haven't done Mock Draft Monday like I usually would on Locked On Vikings is because it's so likely that the Vikings trade up and that you're really just doing day 3. And that just doesn't make for a mock draft that I think gets people as excited as like, well, another one where we just trade all our picks up to 4 and don't pick for like 100 picks. But what about the situation where we don't? Again, a situation I don't think is particularly likely at all. And depending on which reporter you believe, that ship might have already even sailed. So we might be running out of time for this to even be an option. So I guess let's get our mock in while we can. So here's the goal of this, right? This is not just to say, oh, woe is us, what would happen at quarterback or whatever. Let's say that, the Cardinals say, no, we're sticking and taking Marvin Harrison, and the Chargers trade down with the Giants or something like that. And for whatever reason, those top 4 quarterbacks all off the board and the Vikings don't get them or maybe the Vikings just decide, you know what, shoot, we're going to have to do 4 first-round picks to go up and trade for them. And we're not doing it. What if we don't, right? How do we make a good situation out of that? And I think you have to, this is like a big play to your outs moment. And I want to try to do the mock with that in mind, but I want to talk philosophy a little bit first. Play to your outs is a poker term mostly, or like a lot of card games that is, I think, in the lexicon a little bit more than it used to be. But essentially it is the idea that, look, it only matters what you do in cases where you get the draws that you need to have won that hand, right? So play as though you're going to get the proper draw, so that you're set up for that situation if it comes. And if you don't get the draw that would have won you the hand, then whatever, right? So this is very much a play to your out situation. If there is no quarterback coming for the Vikings in the draft, which again, I think is very unlikely, don't freak out too much, but if, how do we take that situation and turn it into something manageable? That's going to be the goal of this mock draft. So it's not just going to be, let's look at some needs or whatever. It's how do we make this so set up for the quarterback that somebody like a free agent like Dak Prescott will want to come to Minnesota. And that option will be like super readily available to us if we want it, or if we want to trade for somebody, or, if we want to, there's maybe somebody in next year's class that we're super in love with, which sounds like there probably won't be, but what if, right? We're deep in hypotheticals here. So that's how we're going to do this. Okay. I am going to use the PFF mock sim. It seems like the only one that's finished and that works. So we're going there, and we're going to dive in. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the board as it comes. I'll put up a screen recording, but otherwise just listen up and we'll dive in. So we're just going to let these first few picks go off the board, and assuming that the quarterbacks go the way that we expect them to, we've kind of seen a pretty chalk world here. Marvin Harrison and Rome Odunze go, as well as Joe Alt, and 4 quarterbacks. And then we're sitting with Atlanta, 8th on the clock. And we're probably not going to see a lot of defenders go off. Yeah, so just Dallas Turner has gone off the board in terms of defenders. So in the spirit of this exercise, this is the exercise where you don't force it at quarterback, right? So we could take Mike Penix here, we could take Bo Nix here, but that would kind of feel like forcing it, right? You're just like reaching like absolute heck to get up there. So there's a lot of players that I actually really, really, really like here. You got your pick of the litter at cornerback. You can take Quinyon Mitchell or Cooper DeJean. You can take Nate Wiggins, either of the Alabama guys. There's a lot of cornerbacks, and I kind of like leaving that to 23. Plus, I feel like the D-line's a bit more of a dire need. And Johnny Newton would really be the guy that takes it home for me. But I also really like Laiatu Latu at 11 here. I think that taking the kind of the second edge. And I actually might like him more than Dallas Turner too. So I'd actually feel pretty good about that. I'm going to hit Laiatu Latu here and let Johnny Newton go somewhere else. As much as I really like Johnny Newton, we're going to take the edge rusher and hope we get a little bit of star power to add to Van Ginkel and Grenard so that those guys don't have to be bigger load carriers than they were at their old teams. And as for Latu specifically, his game is kind of hard to nail down because he is a very powerful player. You can see strength, especially in the way that he defends the run. And when he pass rushes, he's a big time hand fighter. He's very much like a technique finesse pass rusher with the body and the athletic ability of like a power rusher. So while I think it's great that you can see power rushers with like that much technique and finesse, I almost think the best future for him is to just have him be like a bull rush spam kind of guy where he's just so strong and powerful that it's just like hell to play against him. And then you can get like a kind of hezzy bull rush, a counter punch here and there that he can kind of pull out, and you know that it's refined and you know that it's there. And if he pulls it out in like select spots, he can kind of have that super clutch feel while also being, a force on the outside to have to deal with, and winning with bull rushes occasionally as well. And it'll give him a lot of control over not only how he is attacking the tackle, but when he is deciding to make it his moment, right? And you can apply a little bit of situational awareness and have a really exciting player. So as I'm sitting here at pick number 23, a lot of the cornerbacks have now gone off. We lost DeJean, we lost Terrion Arnold. We still have Byron Murphy, we still have Kool-Aid McKinstry, and we still can, of course, take a quarterback or something like that. But I'm going to try a trade down here, and I want to go with a reasonably small trade down. The teams that are interested are a little bit too far down for me. I'm just going to try to go a little bit, just not too much. We'll go with like the Buffalo Bills, and we'll trade down with them. We'll try to get pick 60 out of the deal. Maybe we'll give like a 5 back. That might not be enough. Maybe you have to give a 5 and a 4 back. We'll offer that and see and great. So the Bills took it. So we can actually resume the trade there. And what I'm going to do is now that I've got the pick I've got pick 28 now, and I've got a couple of players that I really like. So when one of them gets drafted, I'm going to trade up, and hopefully none of the guys that I really, really like will get drafted. And sure enough, Byron Murphy went, but Kool-Aid McKinstry did not. So I'm going to take him. Now, again, this would be a place in the draft where I think it would be super reasonable to like grab a quarterback and say, okay, Bo Nix or Mike Penix, you're my guy, right? But I think, again, in the spirit of this exercise, we're trying to say, what if we don't sell out, right, for QB? And what if we just like go full hog on defense, make a really good team, and see what we do with that and see how we feel about it? So let's try to stay true to that exercise, and we'll take Kool-Aid McKinstry and move on from there. And then we'll let the draft sim cook a little bit before we get to the pick 60 that we picked up from the Buffalo Bills. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. Deals up to and even an hour into the start of the event. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And they have all-in pricings. That means it's a feature that you can toggle that will show you your actual total at checkout up front. So it includes all the random taxes and stuff and any fees. They are upfront about everything. So you can see exactly what you are actually paying. And they have the lowest price guarantee. And if you find the same section and row for a lower price somewhere else, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. You can also take a look at your seat's view. Make sure you are satisfied with the angle and the view and that you're not stuck behind a pillar or whatever. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here with this little mock draft sim, why don't you go check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page and their live 24/7 stream. Let's move on here, and I'm looking at quarterbacks, right? And we'll see exactly. What I don't want to do is get priced out. Now that we're in the second round, I don't want to get priced out of Nix, Penix, and Spencer Rattler, who has kind of joined this conversation as well. And we'll see who kind of shows up. Right now, we're sitting at pick 51, and there goes Nix at 51. So and Penix goes. So now I'm at 60. I got 3 guys left before we get to 57. I actually kind of want to move up and say, let's make sure we get our QB, because I don't want to be stuck without like Rattler, right? I don't want to be stuck looking at like Joe Milton or somebody like that. And I don't think it's going to take a ton to move up to pick 57. I can just give up my lowest 7th round pick and probably get that taken. And let's see if they'll take that, if they offer that. They said no to that, and they picked Jonathan Brooks. So now we can actually do the same thing with the Packers, which is very funny, and offer that trade. And they took it. So the Packers let us come up and we're going to take Spencer Rattler with this one. Maybe that's a bit of a reach for him, but we don't want to get stuck like trying to talk ourselves into, Michael Pratt. So let's take Spencer Rattler, move on with our lives. That sound good? Because now we're picking at 108. We've still got a few day 3 picks left to go. We managed to kind of use a couple of them to get a little bit more juice. We still got a quarterback, right? We're not like super stoked on Spencer Rattler. Some people are super stoked on Spencer Rattler. I don't know a ton about him, so I'm just going to kind of go with the chalk opinion that he's competing with Sam Darnold, and we'll see if we get anything out of this guy, right? So that's going to be where we stand while we let this thing sim out to pick 108. So sitting at pick 108, we're kind of at the top of that 4th round, and I actually really like the names around this particular area of the draft. I think Mekhi Wingo is not a 4th rounder to me. He is D lineman out of LSU. There are a lot of names on the board here. There's McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M, Christian Boyd out of Northern Iowa. All of the LSU guys, Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson is pretty low on the board that's like fed into this mock sim. Tyler Davis out of Clemson. There's a lot of guys, Leonard Taylor, but I like Mekhi Wingo a lot. I see him more as a late day 2 guy, so getting him at pick 108 is actually pretty good value to me, even though the board that we're using kind of doesn't agree with me here, which is what happens on these mock draft sims. It's basically just becomes a big list of guys that you like more than the like public fed boards like. But I really like Mekhi Wingo as a pass rushing D tackle that can also be really disruptive in the run game and can kind of hold his own and hold his spot and stuff. Technically very sound. I like what he offers there, but now we're going to get into round 5. We've bolstered the D-line a little bit. We've gotten something at quarterback, but again, I'm thinking, okay, we might have to like talk ourselves into a Spencer Rattler, Sam Darnold season. What does that need so that we don't feel like we're just totally punting a season away? And maybe there's another skill player that comes in. Maybe there's another running back that comes in that, pushes Ty Chandler. We're in the 5th round now, so we're not exactly going to get huge nukes and needle movers, but we can at least try to get something that feels a little bit more like we're trying to aid this quarterback a little bit, even though that offense is pretty well constructed. Let's try to get some depth. We've got Tyrone Tracy, who's a running back out of Purdue. We have Dylan Laube, the running back out of New Hampshire. I know my guy Tyler really likes him. We also have Dylan Johnson out of Washington. This one goes out to Tyler Forness, just started at the Sporting News. Go check him out. We'll take Dylan Laube for him. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Okay, so we got a halfback. We're going to take the first pick in round 6 now. and we'll see what comes up there. Of course, we could try for kind of some random, like a random tight end that could maybe help with depth while we wait for TJ Hawkinson to come back. Honestly, I don't really mind double dipping on the D line or even at the cornerback position. There are a lot of guys that I think could, or there's a lot of reasons that I think, you could just kind of keep adding to that room and just have this really robust competition and see who comes out of it. I think here I'll slam Florida State tight end Jaheim Bell. An extra tight end depth seems like a pretty good use of a 6th round pick. Plus, the special teams of it all, especially with the new kickoff rules, bigger guys might be a little bit more useful in special teams. It will become a little bit more sensible to keep 5 tight ends, so you're not just like lighting a draft pick on fire or like forcing yourself to cut Nick Muse or something like that. Like keeping all those guys might make sense for special teams reasons. Most of these 6th and 7th round picks, you gotta think special teams on them. Special teams gets you on the roster. So we have one pick now at the very tail end of the draft. You're kind of right in the middle of round 7. We've got pick number 230. And with that, we'll see what we take. But to be honest, I'm pretty far out of my depth at this point. So we'll see kind of what comes up next. But honestly, as I'm taking this, it feels very much like I haven't moved the needle enough, even though I do feel like I got as much value as I could out of where we were standing. I'm sitting here at the 7th round. What the heck? Let's take the Evan Anderson out of Florida Atlantic. He's kind of become one of my guys, so we'll draft Evan Anderson, and we'll let this thing sim out to the end, and then we'll kind of take stock. All right, so we had to make a couple of trades to make things work, but I feel pretty good about where we've ended up here, at least in terms of with the limitations I put on myself, right? Like, I don't feel like we've got QB of the future. Maybe Spencer Rattler surprises everybody. Maybe I'll like him a lot more than I think I'll like him as we go in. But hey, getting Latu and Mekhi Wingo on the D-line, getting Kool-Aid McKinstry to kind of help add competition to that cornerback room. And I do think McKinstry can just like take a starting role from guys that, we're hoping someone steps up. Now I think I have somebody that's going to step up, and I feel pretty good about the depth guys too. Some random skill players. It's all right. Like I do feel like I fixed the problems on the defense. Or at least I gave them an opportunity to be fixed. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But I don't feel like I gave quarterback a great opportunity to be fixed. I feel like I very much settled here. And yeah, this isn't a situation you want to be in. This is a situation you're kind of forcing yourself in, assuming that a whole bunch of plans A's, B's, and C's didn't work. But trying to make lemonade out of it, yeah, I feel like, okay, it allows you to get the defense feeling a little bit better. But at what cost? Let's take stock in a little bit. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. We are in a golden era of the calendar for sports with the basketball tournaments wrapping up. My goodness, the women's bracket has some heaters coming down. Paige Beckers versus Caitlin Clark. You can even put together like an over-under parlay with those two, not to mention South Carolina in the other bracket. It is very exciting. Plus, MLB's going down. You have NFL draft props, NBA and NHL playoffs coming up soon. All kinds of stuff to get really, really excited about and to gamble on. So if you want to get started, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet on the tourney, NBA, MLB, NHL, whatever you want. Once again, any $5 bet. If you win, you get $200 back if you sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So, let us debrief. Do we feel okay about that? I don't really feel great about it. So that feels like a pretty good draft. And of course it is, right? I picked all of my guys. I picked all the players I like. Like Latu, I like him. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I really like him. Mekhi Wingo, I like him. Miles Murphy, I like him. Like I picked a lot of players that I personally would be very excited about. But it's so hard to look at the problems that we solved, which are the problems that if you trade up a whole bunch, you might not necessarily be able to solve, right? Like you trade 11 and 23 up to get your quarterback. You're not solving the D-line problem in the draft, right? You're not solving the cornerback problem in the draft. And that's why guys like Shaq Griffin came, and that's why they have guys like Renard and Van Ginkel and even, the Jerry Tillerys of the world and signing like 4 of those guys and seeing who wins, right? Like you have that as a way to say, okay, at least we have something semi-serious as a defensive line, even though I don't know if that's going to be like in the top 20 defensive lines in the league. At least it's something semi-serious. And you can go into the draft saying, if we don't come out of this with a first-round defensive lineman, our hair is not on fire, right? And that's all they want. That's all they needed to do, or that's all they wanted to do in free agency. Now, I think they did need to do more for me to feel that way about it, but that's clearly the way they feel about it, right? And maybe another free agent will come after the draft. The alternative is to do this, to draft someone like Latu at 11. Look, it is very likely that by pick 11, there will be like one defender that has been taken. Like that simulation, having 9 offensive players go off the board is actually like super likely, because you can pretty much put in Sharpie that there will be 4 quarterbacks in the top 5 picks and 3 wide receivers in the top 8 or 9 picks, right? That's already 7 guys. So put Joe Alton there, 1 tackle, and then you're already at pick number 9 with no defenders being taken off the board. And then, put another tackle in there, put Brock Bowers in there, who was on the board when I picked, but I don't think that was worth mentioning. It's very likely that you'll get your pick of defenders. So if you want that alternative where you go, gosh, this D-line problem bugs me so much, I simply must sit at 11 and pick Latu or Dallas Turner or whoever's there, then you may do that. But gosh, it just feels like I solved a little bit of a problem and left a massive gaping fire in my kitchen. But I got the dust off the mantle. Like that's kind of what it feels like I did there, because the competition of Spencer Rattler and Sam Darnold does not move me. It just doesn't at all. And I'm going off of like a prior on Spencer Rattler, so maybe I will fall head over heels in love with him and be the biggest Spencer Rattler stan in the world. I don't know what will happen when I actually get around to watching him, and it won't be for a while, so don't hold your breath. But assuming, just going off the consensus opinion there, or if you want to say that guy was like Penix or Nix, like I don't feel like that's a winning formula. I don't feel like this team is a complete thought yet. I don't feel like we go into camp with Sam Darnold competing with Spencer Rattler and go, this team is here. Our window is open, right? Like you don't think that way with those guys. You're going, gosh, I hope we can maybe eke out 6 games this year. And that doesn't feel like the opportunity that's in front of the Vikings right now. The Vikings have an opportunity to make this, to like plant their flag on the guy that they want. And then this becomes the build that defines the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah tenure, right? We don't know what that build is yet, because they've just gone through a couple of like, let's like run this with Kirk a couple times. We are now in that was the, well, he inherited a lot of Rick guys, right? It's still kind of the Rick Spielman tenure the last couple of years. We are now in the Kwesi tenure. And I think that starts when you get your quarterback for a GM, right? Chris Ballard, for example, he went like 5 years before he got his quarterback, but he will go down as the guy who drafted Anthony Richardson, for better or worse. That will affect his legacy way more than like the random Phillip Rivers year. And this is an opportunity that the Vikings have to start that. And having a little bit of a weak D-line and say, this is going to be below average and maybe bad. Okay, that's a problem. Not denying that. But it's so worth putting up with that problem if it means you can get your quarterback. It's not worth putting up with that problem if you're just going up to get a quarterback because you just feel like you need one, right? You need to be in love with this guy. But by all accounts and all reports, the Vikings love Drake May and they love JJ McCarthy. So giving up on those guys so that you can like maybe get a little more competition in the cornerback room, it just doesn't feel worth it to me at all. You can find other free agents and stuff too, because there is still a little bit of money left in the coffers. Like I am looking at how do I see this team competing, and it does feel like you're just punting a year. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Feels like you're punting a year, and honestly, if the QB class isn't good next year, which it's not supposed to be, but we'll see, right? A lot can change in a year of college. But if it isn't good, like it's supposed to be not good, then you're punting 2 years, and that's kind of unacceptable. That doesn't last, right? You're punting the last reasonably affordable, like the reasonably cheap years of Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson's going to turn 30. You're going to have Lyman turning 30. You can't punt 2 years in the NFL. Careers don't last that long. Jobs don't last that long. So I don't think that it's a viable option. I guess that's what I found here. I did a draft and I don't really feel like I could go back in and like run the sim again and get a draft I feel better about. And I don't feel very good about this team's chances to compete. So I don't think that it's a viable option. They might get forced into it if all of the bad things turn up. If every single dice roll turns up snake eyes, then maybe they are forced into that. But I don't think that that's where we're headed, if I'm, reading the reports correctly. And I definitely don't think that it's an idea that we should be striving for. That's really the conclusion that I wanted to get out of this does this feel viable? Does this feel good? And no, it really does not. So tomorrow, maybe we'll hone in a little bit more, because it kind of feels like we're down to 2 quarterbacks for the Vikings in terms of the rumor mill that has been going around. It feels like we're narrowing a little bit. So we'll take a check-in on that, talk a little bit maybe about what about, Justin Jefferson as part of this trade, because everybody's been talking, everybody who's not plugged into the Vikings talks about that, and I feel like I want to address it for them. No, he won't be, but we'll get into it, right? I'll see y'all tomorrow for whatever it is, and as always, Skull.